Hello everyone, this is John from Vulgar Kitten Studios and welcome to episode 8 of our introduction to web development and PHP MVC, all that good stuff. What we're going to be doing today is starting on our route class, or our route command class. I know that I said that we were going to try to take a break from commands, but that's really not going to be possible. We're going to have to go through a couple more commands before we can actually start working in the browser. Just so that we actually get this done a little bit quicker. I mean, we could bounce around and do all of that stuff, but like honestly, the flow that I got going on here, trust me guys, it's gonna work out for us pretty nicely. So what we're gonna do is, first of all, we're gonna open up that shell script that I had you guys download, and we're gonna come down to the bottom of it, and well, actually, first we're gonna make a couple of different things in here. We're going to make a private, or yes, a private static input variable, and that's just to initialize it. And then we're going to make a couple of methods in this class itself. So we're going to make a public static function called input, and this is just going to be simply to return self input. And we're going to make a public static function set input, and we're going to accept a string, and this is going to just set our self input to that string. And the reason that we're doing all of this is just so that we can actually work with loops within our shell, and that is because we want to actually present a series of questions whenever the user wants to create a route. So that way we can configure that route to use different components of our application. And that is the reason that we're doing that. So we can go ahead and close this down now, and we can open up our route command, and we have our basic help function here. And we'll go ahead and start out with the make function, or actually probably take this out. We'll take this out and we will say, let's see. In this case, we don't want to default to empty. We're going to default to null with our type. And we'll say if we didn't present a type, then we'll do something, otherwise we'll do something else. And that is because what we're going to do is actually create a function outside of the make function, which is going to create the route. So we'll make a private function called create route, and that is going to accept the name and a type. And so we'll say container is equal to JSON decode UTF-8 encode file get contents our app containers routes.json. And I don't really think that we need to UTF-8 encode this, so I'm going to take that out of there. I don't really understand what my thought process was there, so we'll just do it the traditional way. And we're going to start out by saying if not in array our name container routes, and excuse me, I'm going to do that right there. So we actually need to go ahead and create a new file in our containers and call that routes.json, and we are going to make an object, and we'll call that routes, and that is going to be equal to an array, and obviously we're going to have a home route to begin with. And we'll just go ahead and default it that way. All right, so if that is not in the array, then we'll go ahead and push the name of this next route, or the name of the route that we pass into the next element of the array. And we're going to need a set of fields for the questions that we want to ask the user. So we'll say fields is equal to, and we'll have an array. And we want to ask the user what path the route is going to have, what controller we want that route to use, and what method on that controller to use as well. And so we'll make a properties array, and that is just going to be equal to an empty array for now. And we need a run variable, which is going to be called true, and that is just so we can construct our while loop. So we'll say while run, and this is going to drop us down into essentially a new command line interface. And we'll say if our shell input is equal to exit, then we'll just set run is equal to false. And we'll say for I is equal to 0, I is less than the count of the questions that we want to ask, I plus plus. Then we are going to, first of all, kind of format this out so the user knows what we're doing. So we'll say shell write, and we'll say enter the name of the, and I want to make this double quotes just because I need to get in that habit. Enter the name of the, and then append on the fields I, whatever question that we're asking, that you wish to give this route. And we'll go down to the next line. And I actually want to make this a light, probably a light blue. So I'll say light blue. And then we'll shell write. And I'll just have this, there's a couple of chevrons, and make that a yellow color. And then we'll shell set input trim, and we'll use the fgets and get the standard input and give it a length of 1024. So that way we can accept all possible characters from the keyboard into the fgets function. And this just this is basically to route all of the input from our command line into our PHP script. And so with that, we can go ahead and start working with our properties array, which we'll just push our properties, push the input into our properties. And then we'll say if I is equal to the count of fields minus 1, because we want to make sure we're at the proper index. So if I is less, or yeah, then we'll say we'll create a final array variable. So we'll array combine the fields to the properties and set our final, the next element of our final array to be equal to the name, and I'm going to cast this as an object, so I'll say final is equal to object final, and that's just so I can work with it a little bit easier. And then we'll create a template, so we'll say template is equal to app service view make templates code route and route empty. And we'll pass in an array of data, which is going to be the name of the route, and that's going to be name. And we'll want the path, which is going to be the final path. And we'll need the controller, which, let me just line these up properly, which is going to be the final controller, and the method, which is going to be the final method. And so finally, what we can do is actually put the contents where we want them. So we'll say file, put contents, app, routes, and then give it the name, and then we'll store our routes as JSON files. And so that is going to be the template, and we'll also want to file, put contents, app containers routes.json, and the data that we'll use is JSON encode container. And then we'll shell write the route name has been successfully created, and go down to the next line and make that a green color, and just set run to be equal to false, like that. And so otherwise, we'll come down here and just put in our little else. Well, let's see. I don't think I went down enough else. We'll just say shell and write that route already exists. And we'll put in our line break with a red color. And then we should be able to create a route like that. But we also need to go ahead and make our template. So we'll come in here and make a new file, which is going to be a route empty.blade.php. And within here, we'll just format out what we want our route to look like, which is going to be name. And we want to insert the name. And we want the path. So we'll insert the path. And we want the controller. Which is just going to be controller. And we want the method, which is going to be method. And that's what our routes are actually going to look like. So since we already have our home route, we could actually probably, let's see. Well, we'll go ahead and leave that in there for now. And we'll just test this out. So we'll say PHP lace route make, and just we'll make a YOLO route. And what is going on here? Okay, so it didn't actually make the route because we didn't call the method. So we need to come back into our command line class and call the method in our make function. So if we don't pass in a type, then we want to call this with the default create route, and then give that a name of or a name and the empty type. Otherwise, if we do pass in a type, then we'll create route with the name and the type. And just to make this a little bit easier to work with, we'll probably want to put this in a switch statement. So honestly, I'm going to do this with literally everything. So let's see. Well, everything up from fields. I'll take the entire while loop and I'll put this in a switch on type, and I'll say case empty, and just throw this in there. And so now we can just format that in, and we can actually create different types of routes. So let's see if that works. Alright, so now we have a undefined variable fields p on line 67. So let's see, 86. Well, fields p on line 67. Right. Alright, so let's see, enter the name of the path that you wish to give this route. And that's going to be YOLO. And the name of the controller, which is just going to be, let's say, home controller. And the name of the method, which is just going to be index. And file put contents YOLO dot history message. File or directory. On 89. And that's because we don't actually have a folder within our app folder, so we need to create a new folder to store our routes, and that's just going to be called routes like that. So let's just go through that one more time. YOLO already exists. Let's see, routes, and that's because that's stored in our container. So we'll go into our routes and delete YOLO from our routes. And we'll put YOLO in there, enter the name of the path, YOLO, the name of the controller, home controller, and the name of the method, which is just going to be index. And so the route has been successfully created. We see that YOLO is in the container, and within routes we have a new perfectly formatted route. And so that's how we're going to be working with routes. Obviously there's going to be some different advantages, or not advantages and disadvantages, but some differences between those different types of routes. And so let's see, now we just need to make the delete method, so that way we can get rid of our useless YOLO route. And the delete is fortunately a lot more straightforward. So all we need to do is check to see if the name has been passed in. If it hasn't, then I'll put the help, and then just say if file exists app routes, and then the name dot JSON. We'll just say not instead of messing around. Do a little else, and then we'll say shall write no route by that name, and just put on our little line break there and give it a red color. And then we can say set up our container. So we'll say the container is equal to JSON encode, and then file get contents the app containers routes.json, and Now that we have that, we can loop the array. So for I is equal to 0, I is less than count container routes, then I plus plus, and then we can just unset, or actually we'll say if our container routes I is equal to name, then we'll unset the container routes I, removing that from the array, and then file put contents app containers routes.json, and we'll just JSON encode our container, and we'll unlink the app routes name.json file, and then we'll shell write route successfully deleted. Give it a green color, and we also want to be able to say that shell write no route by that name. And that is already done actually above us, so I'm wrong there. So we'll go ahead and try to delete our YOLO route. So we'll PHP lace route delete YOLO. And YOLO, let's see. Syntax error, unexpected plus plus. Expecting variable. So we need an I there. Trying to get a property of a non-object. Line 122. So that is definitely an object. And I'm actually using JSON encode instead of JSON decode, which is what I intended to do. So now it should actually work. So we'll say PHP lace route delete YOLO. And that route has been successfully deleted. We'll go ahead and check this out. So it's not in that array anymore, and there is no routes stored within here. And so now that we already have our home route, we should go ahead and make a new file. We'll make a new file, and we'll call this, actually, let's do a little experimentation. Let's see if we can make a route without anything being in this array. So let's take routes there. Let's try doing it with the command. So PHP lace route make home, and we want to use the home controller. And well, let's go ahead and try that one more time. We want to make that with a / as the path, and then use the home controller as the controller and index as the method. So the route has been successfully created. We do have it in here, and we have a perfectly valid route. So that is actually pretty perfect there. And that's all we need to do for the route command. Now, obviously, it's not going to work as far as like creating a route just yet, at least not one that works in the browser. But one thing that we can do, let's go ahead and get rid of this here. we can actually make another method. Let's go ahead and make another method within our routes class, or route class, and we'll make a public function ls just to see what routes we actually have. And so we'll say routes is equal to scandir, and just get the app routes path, and we'll set up a for loop. So we'll say for I equals 0, I is less than count routes, and I plus plus. Then we want to say if routes I is not equal to dot or routes routes I is not equal to dot dot, then we want to output them. And I know that that looks a little weird, but this is just because that's how the scandir function works. Whenever you use scandir, it will output all of the files that are in that directory, but it'll also output a string for that directory and for the directory higher. And so you want to exclude those whenever you use the scan directory, and that's just the dot and the dot dot, and that'll always be there no matter how many times you use scan directory, it'll be there. So we'll want to say routes I is equal to explode, and we want to use the dot as the delimiter and the current index as the string, and we want to shell write only the file name, not the file extension. So we'll say routes I 0, and then append on a line break and give that a purple color. So now we should be able to say PHP lace route ls, and that will output all of the routes that we actually have in our folder. So that is actually it for the routes class. And now that we have that, like I said, obviously it's not going to work right out the gate, so we'll need to be able to make views and make controllers and all of that, and actually set up a route service and call that prior to these routes working. But we do have the structure, at least the data structure, that we want to use for routes, and that's just an object that displays all of the information that we want to be attached to that route. And so I appreciate you watching this video. I will see you in the next episode when we start working with controllers, or at least we should be able to go a little bit quicker within our generators, or at least our generator commands anyway. So I'll see you then.